all here in person for the second time ever. Hello, I think that's Kurt in the light. Beautiful. Thank you all so much for joining us here this evening. It's energizing to be with you all in the same physical space. And I'd just like to invite Madison and Nemeth to center us and open us in prayer. Sure, yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, so in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Father, thank you for bringing us together in person today. Thank you for keeping us safe and healthy. We ask that you continue to watch over our community and guide us to maintain our health. Allow us to engage in fruitful conversations and be agents for change on this campus and elsewhere. We pray for the respect and dignity of each human person. Please protect those who are most vulnerable among us and guide us in being strong allies and friends. And help us foster a community of love and inclusion. Through Christ our Lord, amen.
Beautiful, we can transition to roll call.
Dan Gaudenby-Stoltz. Here. Isabella Garcia. Here. Daniel Schermerhorn. Here. Sarah Kirsch. Here. John Mansfield. Here. Christina Escadillo. Here. Michael Dugan. Present. Anoop Sankara. Here. Michael Miragani. Here. Jordan Leiden. Here. Niels Casperson. Here. Maggie Allen. Here. Albertina Estrada Martinez.
Here.
Madison Nunez. Here. Henry Jackson. Here. Benjamin Earhart.
Present.
Jason Thomas.
Here.
Natalie Ortega.
Here.
Molly Schrock.
Here.
Elaine Teeters.
Here.
Ahmed Al-Hassani.
Here.
Alec Rayler.
Here.
Bianca Burnett.
Here.
Carson Thompson.
Here.
Libby Messman.
Here.
Anisha Japira. Michael Lynch.
Here.
Miles Kelly.
Here.
Alex Kobolowski.
Here.
Patrick Lee.
Here.
Grace Franco.
Here.
Teresa Salazar.
Here.
Henry Bates.
Here.
Blake Johnson.
Here.
Renee Pearson.
Here.
Sam Canova.
Here.
Ricardo Nick Poole.
Here.
Perfect. Rachel Engel.
Here.
Aaron Benavides.
Here.
Grace Stevenson. Murray Pfaff.
Here.
Julia Dilhoff or Kurt Golden.
Here.
Awesome. David Hongs.
Here.
Estefan Ramirez. Perfect. And Karen Kennedy.
I'm here. I'm just on Zoom.
Beautiful. Did you all get a chance to read the minutes that Catherine sent out last time? Are there anything outstanding after she provides a lovely summary for us?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we talked about an update from campus dining and the faculty senate. There's a discussion on what the off-campus town hall and student advisory committee looked like and what their purposes are. A reminder about the Women's Leadership Forum for last Sunday, which was a huge success. And we welcomed 4 new senators, and then Grace Stevenson delivered a presentation about FMB's fall update and a discussion on the student union COVID-19 financial account, which will be talked about today. And then we also passed order SO 2021-6 about suspending some elections.
Wait, any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, Mike.
I think one of the oaths of office was at the end of the meeting, but in the minutes it appears towards the beginning.
Okay, I can move that around.
You can copy and paste, that's an easy one. Any further? Okay, wonderful. There are no further questions, comments, concerns. We can welcome our special guest for the evening, our Vice President of Student Affairs, Erin Hoffman Harding, to give us a short presentation.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation from Sarah. It's been actually my privilege and joy to have a chance to work with Sarah and Rachel and Aaron and actually Sam and several other students as part of our student reopening committee, but it's always a treat to be invited to this group. So what Sarah asked for this evening was a general overview. Do I need to go somewhere? There are people on Zoom.
If you're on there.
Okay. Sounds great. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. And then if someone has questions on Zoom, Sarah, you will field them. Perfect. Okay. Sounds great. So it's a great pleasure. What I thought I'd do this evening, Sarah asked for a general overview of some of the changes that we've made as an institution in terms of the semester. And I think that certainly has been a constant for all of us as we've returned to campus this fall is changes and adjustments. So my intention this evening is actually just to let you know where we were, where we are today in a very brief fashion. And I hope open up the conversation for as many questions or ideas, suggestions, or concerns that you would like to raise this evening. So I will go quickly so that we have the most time for discussion. Let's see. There we go. Probably the thing that happened before all of you returned to campus was really a physical change to campus, which is represented in the room that we see today, and the preparation of all of our campus spaces to offer safety and the best in health practices in terms of spacing. So what you see there are our beloved student centers, Duncan and La Fortune, and the university, I think as all of you know, got a variety of different points of advice from experts across the country, both medical and other institutions, as they were looking and putting those together. And that perhaps of anything I'm going to talk about today is the sticking point that really hasn't changed much since all of us came back together. We've adjusted, I hope, in positive ways in terms of some of the other changes, but we knew as students returned to us in August that we would learn more about what you needed and how we as a campus community could come together. And so there have been a variety of adjustments since then. Outdoor spaces. So I have a couple of slides on this. We knew and heard from the folks at the Cleveland Clinic as well as the university's own doctors that one of the safest things we could encourage students and all of us to do during this pandemic time is actually to make outdoor spaces available to students. So we have been at this, I would say now we are in mode number 2, and as of this weekend, we'll go into mode number 3. So originally, before all of you came back to campus, we put up a couple of tents on North and South Quad, knowing that that would serve both programming needs as well as dining. But we tried to open up a variety of outdoor spaces on campus. And then a couple of weeks ago, did I go past that one? There was a lovely picture of the library lawn, but maybe I skipped it, Erin, did I? There it is. Maybe it's coming later, but the programming modifications is really phase 2. And I hope that that has been a space, at least from what I've judged over the last weekend or so, been well received by students. And again, the idea being that we're trying to offer you safe spaces to gather and programs where you can come together and connect with one another in safe ways. And great leadership from the student activities team, but many people around the university. And now what I'm so excited about is student groups and organizations beginning to program in these spaces. So that is phase 2. What'll happen this coming week is actually activation of additional outdoor spaces while we still have good weather here on campus. And so you'll see South Quad, if it hasn't already begun today. Has it begun today? Tomorrow, we'll have some additional spaces again for students to gather and some programs coming over the next weekend there. And I would say conversation is very much beginning and underway, and student ideas are really welcome. We know that cooler weather is here today and is on its way. And so if there are ideas or suggestions that students have in terms of ways that you'd like to come together and connect in that second half of the semester, we are all ears and really trying to brainstorm some of those concepts ourselves and even thinking ahead to the spring semester as well. So Erin, which way should I go? Yeah. Hall life. So hall life, certainly for any of our students who live on campus, probably the major change that happened over the summer, if we can all think back that far, is the letter that I sent to the student community in June, wanting to make sure that students felt as if they had options and choices for where they would live this fall, knowing that so much was going to change and that students might have different preferences. And so we did give students an option to move off campus this academic year and still earn credit toward the residency requirement. I can happily say that actually the vast majority of students decided to stay on campus, and even our study abroad students, we were able to offer a bed on campus to any student who wanted it. Now, for some of the students who were intending to study abroad, they weren't all able to return to their home halls. And so we have the Pangbourne community this year, and actually a little pilot program that I'm going to be really interested to hear from the students living over at Fisher Grad, some undergraduates, what the experience has been like there, but we were able to open up those additional spaces for students. Again, for students who've lived off campus, this is an area where we're still evolving and changing in terms of practices of gathering, and we've really benefited from student feedback. We began with a set of hall policies, really designed around safety and security. The physical plant hasn't changed much, but we have been making modifications and changes to the guest policy in response to student feedback, as we've heard, and certainly the needs of our students who live in singles and how we can better support and serve them as well. So I hope you've seen and heard that from our rectors and our residential life community, that there's a lot of listening, and we're always really, again, in this area, open to conversation about what's going to support students well, but still keep all of us healthy and safe. Now I'm going to go 2, right? I don't know if this is working. Are you just driving this for me?
I can.
You're okay. I'll keep whizzing through a couple of these. Certainly much of my own work, the areas of student well-being fall under the Division of Student Affairs, and that includes our McDonald Center for Student Well-Being, where we were really happy more than 7,000 students filled out a survey over the summer, trying to get a sense of what some of the needs and impressions of students were going to be as they return to campus. That's part of our division. University Counseling Center, our Center for Student Support and Care, which supports the Sarah Bay Accessibility Services Office. And finally, last but not least, and certainly really crucial in these times, is University Health Services. So University Health Services in a normal year, I hope as all of you know, is a primary care clinic and also a department on campus that serves as well our team physicians for our varsity athletic programs. And they have been invaluable partners for us during these pandemic times in terms of expertise. But beyond UHS, and this is something I'd be happy to answer any questions about for students, the university over the summer built an entirely new unit that we call the COVID Response Unit. And that is the unit that is operating the testing clinic here at the stadium, as well handling quarantine and isolation space and the care and support of students. And in all candor, and I hope you've heard this from us from an institutional standpoint, as we received those initial cases and they grew and spread more quickly than we anticipated, it was an area we needed to adjust, and we didn't serve all of our students, and particularly I would say in terms of quarantine and isolation, as we hoped and aspired to do. I keep going back in my own mind as all of the campus colleagues were planning on that, and we doubled, for example, the number of contact tracers that we could find in any ratio that was available in terms of the general public, and it still wasn't enough to serve our students as frequently and as well as we hope to do. I do think we have added enormous amounts of volunteers and additional expertise over the last several weeks, and I think we are well equipped now to support any needs that our campus community has. But without exception, we regret and know that there were some bumpy experiences of students in quarantine and isolation. And I want to thank all of you for your patience and your care as we have staffed up to better serve all of our students in that area. And then I think before I go into 2 topics that Sarah asked me to particularly talk about beyond COVID, I want to comment a little bit on something that I've been reflecting on quite deeply over the last week or 2. And this is, I titled it Behavioral Change. It's probably not the best title, but I think this is an enormous time of adjustment for all of us, for you as students, for me as a staff member, and for our faculty as well. And it has been challenging, and I think exhausting, I suspect, in many ways. And what I've been reflecting on over the last week is different messages that we as an institution can deliver to keep one another safe, how we can be encouraging of one another to adopt these health and safety practices. And something I've been particularly worried about over the last week or 2 is very different reactions and questions from students about how do I engage if somebody is engaging in practices that concern me, potentially make me feel that it isn't a safe environment, what do I do? What I've tried to say in a variety of different ways is I've certainly seen from our student body a deep desire to be here. I share that desire. It was awfully lonely without you from March until you returned in August, and this place wasn't the same in many ways, but we're all adopting these new behaviors. And so we all want to be here is my fundamental and I hope underlying core principle. The best way for us to stay together is to adopt these health and safety practices, but we don't want to do that in a way that we want to do that in a way that inspires rather than causes fissures in our community. And I think that's been, for me, perhaps one of the most difficult things over the last month is sometimes in a spirit of transparency for us trying to communicate where cases were occurring and how they were transmitting, that some of our students may have felt left out or targeted. And when we say encourage, I think that's what most students are doing, but I know there's been some concerns raised to me and important ones about how we are handling any behavioral infractions that may come to us. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about that all of you have. Please know that at a minimum, it is balancing a variety of different interests for us. But what I am most reflecting on is how we can use this time of change and adjustment to come together rather than come apart in any way as a campus community. And so I'd love to have more discussion about that point. Last two things that I think are previews, as I understand it, for Sarah for subsequent discussion of this important body is Title IX. And I should share a couple of things about Title IX. So the federal government back in the fall of 2018 sent off for national comment and review a new set of proposed regulations. Title IX has been certainly a really important part of my role and my work in keeping our campus safe. I'm really proud of all of the work that student leaders in particular have done with our Green Dot program, but we had an institutional obligation to really weigh in on that national conversation. And so the university filed a set of comments about the Title IX proposed regulations, and that was in January of 2019. And there was lots and lots of national comments. We were one of several thousand that were submitted. And what happened in May is we got surprised in a couple of ways. One, we got surprised in terms of timing. And so what happened is the final regulations came out from the Department of Education after our academic year had ended. And so that's a challenging time for universities to think about adopting new policy. And we had a very short window to come into compliance with those new regulations. And we had to be in compliance with the federal government by, I think the exact date was August 14th of this year. So right around the time that we started. So we had a very limited window to engage in campus conversation. That was one surprise in terms of the swiftness of the implementation of the timing. The second was quite substantive, and that is going to be a campus conversation that's going to continue over the course of this fall. And the surprise substantively, we expected, did not agree with all of the final regulations as they were issued from the Department of Education, but had an opportunity to comment on them. But the surprise we received is actually related to how student Title IX cases relate to other types of sexual misconduct at the university, and most particularly sexual misconduct cases as it relates to faculty and staff. That was not in the original proposed regs to my recollection, though we did ask a clarifying question in the university's comment about that. But the surprise was the guidance from the federal government was that an institution needs to adopt the same standard terms of a burden of proof for faculty, staff, and student cases. And so that is going to, over the coming semester, going to cause a lot of reflection and conversation from a university's perspective about how we can serve best all three of those audiences. Today at Notre Dame, and in fact, for all of our cases, in terms of an initial finding of responsibility, the university has what's called a preponderance of the evidence standard. And in a very rare exception for faculty severe sanctions, so imagine that somebody's already been found responsible by one burden of proof, the preponderance standard. Then at that second stage of appeal, there's a clear and convincing standard. And that is for severe sanctions that for faculty members might involve a loss of role or a loss of tenure. there. And so they have certainly very high stakes. And because those two standards differ, the university now needs to go through a reflection time period about which standard would be most appropriate across all three cases and in all three situations. And so that will be the provost of the university is going to be appointing actually a committee to deliberate and consider these issues this year. And I do know that she has an intention that there will be student representation as part of that committee. And I think probably over the next few days, the composition of that committee will be named. But I think it's a really important conversation for students to be well informed about as it evolves and really to offer input and opinion, because you are an incredibly important constituent and one of three that will really be considered as we think about permanent compliance with these Title IX regulations. So again, Erin Oliver in the Office of Institutional Equity is actually the university leader who is the expert on this matter, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Last but not least, this is in addition to COVID, probably the thing that I spent the most time on personally this summer was the horrific killing that we saw of George Floyd that really awakened a nation and renewed appreciation and concern about the well-being in particular of people of color, particularly Blacks in our nation, and some real concerns about racial injustice. And I think as I reflected on that time in June, the first time the university community actually came back together was when we came together for a prayer service while most of our students were gone. But what you see on the screen and what I'm really grateful for is I know student government released a really thoughtful statement in solidarity with our students of color and particularly our Black students. And our Black student clubs and organizations took a leadership role across multiple student clubs and published a statement that really challenged the university to do better. And taking that very much to heart, there has been a group of myself as well as some other university administrators working with the authors and leaders of those clubs and organizations over the summer in the four groups that ultimately they asked for change. One was around campus policing and some questions and concerns that they raised there. Secondly, was related actually to student mental health. And thirdly, was broader student life issues, some around space and programming funds for students. And then the last one, certainly quite substantive, was around the academy and training around inclusion and diversity issues for our faculty, and as well a desire from students around the core curriculum and the possibility of some requirements there. So there are some ongoing working groups there. What I've promised to the students that we've been working with is I've long had for the last 5 or 6 years an advisory committee that has been very beneficial to me on student climate issues, but we are morphing and changing that particular committee so that we can run and have a set of action items that we're working on and that are very transparent to students as we go forward. And I know within the student leadership, there's still some conversation to be had about which students would represent and serve on that group, but it's a very much an openness from our standpoint to continue dialogue, action, and change so that the experience of all of our students can be one of increased belonging on our campus for each and every student. I think that may be it, Erin, is it? Okay, so I whizzed through that because I think as Sarah said, we've got until about 6:45 and I'd love to take any questions. I apologize if that was too quickly or if there are any topics I didn't cover, the floor is open and I'll turn it over to Sarah to facilitate questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. That was really informative, not only about campus reopening and subsequent adjustments, but those two topics as well that are of the utmost importance. So I think how we'll facilitate questions is I'll just take 3 at a time and you'll direct your question and we can have a really fruitful dialogue. So I'll see hands. Okay, we got Mike, we got Connor. Do I see another hand? I can't tell it from the back. Who is it? Oh, it's Dan. Okay, wonderful. So we'll go Mike, Connor, Dan. Beautiful.
So I have a number of questions, but just ask the first one that comes to mind. So on August 20th, the Senate passed a resolution that called for Notre Dame to regularly publish and make available the Notre Dame community internal model on the spread of COVID-19 throughout the fall semester. It also called in that same resolution for the number of occupied and vacant quarantine and isolation units to be published, as well as dorm by dorm distribution of cases to be published. Now, I understand the university's gone a long way from August 20th in going for transparency. The dashboard's improved, and and we passed a resolution later saying that we agree that it's something better. But we still, in that same resolution, still call for these things. Does the university have any plan to follow Cornell in publishing internal modeling for the spread of cases, or to provide additional transparency in these numbers to the general student body?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the question. And I have a chance to work with some of our colleagues who put the dashboard together. And I thank you for the recognition. We have been trying to respond to feedback that we've heard. And I would say there's really two interests at place that we think about. One is we want to be very transparent in what we share, but we also are concurrently also consistently thinking about privacy of students and the impact on our campus community. So let me maybe give you an example. The first thing I think we modified is we had long published the number of cases, but students were asking for a breakdown in terms of the different types of potentially students, as well as cases for faculty and staff. And so I think that was the first change that we made. And one of the reasons that we made it when we did is when we felt like it wouldn't be individually identifiable for, particularly in this case, it would have been for staff or faculty grouped as employees. And I think that's why you still see that group together. So we're always balancing that particular interest. And then as we've evolved over time, I think one of the particular things you asked about was quarantine and isolation space. What we've added since that time, I think, is number of students recovered. And so there's sort of active cases, I think, that all of you can see now, as well as students recovered. And what I would respond in terms of the quarantine and isolation space, and I hope we've tried to share this information as helpfully as we can, is actually that's a fluid number. The university has added space, operated with different partners in the local area so that we can respond well to students' needs. So because it's adjusting in that way, we have not had that particular number. But I would say if there are areas that are of most importance to students, it's really good feedback for us to hear on an ongoing basis. So I'm grateful for the changes and certainly happy to take that back to the broader group as we're hearing as well from faculty and staff that might be helpful there. In terms of the specifics about the modeling, I would say we are tracking very closely the data and have consulted a variety of epidemiologists, but there isn't, for example, a model that I am looking at each day, though we are very thoughtfully thinking about the trends that we're seeing and trying to adjust campus practices as a result.
Awesome, thanks so much. We're gonna just do one question at a time. I think we're gonna go Connor, Dan for the first three.
Thank you for presenting today. We all want the best for the health and safety of our student body, but I think we also learned in the first few weeks that students do make some mistakes with the number of tests that we had or the number of cases that we had. In my mind, if there were a time where students would make mistakes, it would be leading up to a game day. Has there been any thought into that and maybe an expanded surveillance testing after a home game?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, has there been some thought? We are increasing surveillance testing actually quite aggressively there. And really, when you think about all the pre-matriculation testing that each student went through, that was our first form, and then we stood it up over time. There. So right now, we're actually piloting. Students have not yet been invited, but I would expect this to come next week. Actually, we have a group of faculty who are working on saliva testing, which would allow us to substantially increase the number of surveillance testing. What we are doing is really thinking thoughtfully about trends. And so we are sampling, I hope, as all of you have read and know, that the surveillance testing is by and large pulled from a random sample, but we do that informed by trends that we're seeing in the cases. So it might be particular places where students are living, and then we would oversample to make sure that we are checking and thinking about that. So our hope and our aspiration is to get to as many as 1,000 surveillance tests a day. That'll probably take us a couple of weeks with the faculty lab, but that is the aspiration as we're working toward it. And to the weekend, we're thinking a lot about it, right? I have been really heartened by the trends that we saw during that very difficult pause in time that we went through as a campus community, but my goodness, how the numbers turned around by all of our students. I think Saturday is a risk. there. But I hope that all of us, myself included, have learned more about how the virus transmits among us and what we can do to keep one another safe. But I think it's really important to be vigilant this weekend. It's one reason that we as a division and with other university partners are trying to, again, offer healthy and safe alternatives for students to make great choices, to, again, still be together, to cheer on the team, to enjoy the game, but to be as safe as we can both before and after.
Thanks so much for that, Connor. We'll go up to Dan.
You mentioned earlier in your presentation that it is a tough discussion to have when you see someone participating in unsafe.
Yeah.
Due to the wide array of possible behaviors, why do all staff and administrators in the dorms not have their own discretion how they respond to and enforce these different rules and restrictions?
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody could hear the question, so let me try to restate it and make sure I got it accurate, so please correct me. But it was a question really about hall staff and our individual communities and how much discretion does hall staff have to enforce the health and safety practices. This actually, I would say, is a topic that probably predates COVID by at least a decade. Here is a university, and this is always the push and pull of residential life, one of our greatest assets, and sometimes I would say our challenge. We want and cherish that individual communities have traditions and signature events and loyalty to their halls, but we've also heard quite consistently from students over the years that there should be some level of consistency in terms of what you can expect, especially as it relates to basic health and safety measures. And I think that's some of the balance. So some of the adjustments that I mentioned earlier about hall life actually arose from feedback from our rectors and our hall staff community, either as questions or difficulties and challenges that they were seeing in their halls. And there was, I think, a good and robust discussion before students came back about, let's start cautiously, which I think in many respects we tried to do, particularly because of congregate living and knowing that that could be a risk for us, and then thought we would adjust over time. Rectors and hall staffs do have discretion, particularly recently in terms of the change to the guest policy to make them more restrictive if they think that would be of importance. But really, I think it's a conversation that has been productive and important among rectors of how they as a whole are hoping that the residential experience will occur on campus. So they are an important voice in that discussion, but we don't want to have 33 different standards, in important part because of what students have asked about consistency over the years.
Thanks so much, Dan. I'm going to take 2 questions in this next round because there was a Zoom question that I did not see in the first
Okay.
round, unfortunately. So I'll take 2 questions. Who is that hand up there in the back, green hat? Michael, I'm so sorry. The mask, the hat, the light, it's hard. And next to you? Renee. Okay, perfect. Yes. So we'll go with Stefan over Zoom, and then we'll do Mike and Renee. So the question I got from Stefan was, what mechanisms are in place to increase diversity at the university?
Oh, in terms of the diversity of the student body?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to be way afield here. Actually, because I and my responsibilities in student life here have a responsibility for serving all of you, and I hope supporting you well once you're here. So the actually enrollment management division, which is led by Don Bishop and Christy Pratt is our relatively new director of admissions, really think about our recruiting strategies. I know that the diversity of the student body is important to all of our students. That's one thing I can say from the information that we gather each year from our senior class in particular on the undergraduate side, and all of our students, regardless of whether or not you're a student of color, have been asking for more diversity on our campus. And I know that Don and Christy would probably be the best ones to think about some of the specific recruiting strategies. The way we tend to play a role is the 3 offices that are part of the division that I work with and serve our Multicultural Student Programs and Services, our Gender Relations Center, and our Office of Student Enrichment, all of whom are involved in sharing the experiences of our students so that we can better inform our admissions trends there. So they'd be the best and latest in terms of some of the recruitment efforts where they partner with our offices, but my experience is mostly with the experience of students once they're here.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. We'll go for Michael.
Great. Could you talk a little bit about what the university's plan is regarding like flu season and students having symptoms that are very similar to COVID but not being
Yeah, thank you. It's something that we did change a policy before we came back to campus together around the flu because of the similarity of the symptoms. Is many of you may remember, depending on what year you are here at Notre Dame, that we have a list of required vaccinations. And prior to this year, actually, the flu had not been one of the required vaccinations. And because we want to do the best job that we can for all of you in our campus community about avoiding that confusion, we did make the flu vaccine mandatory. And so actually one of my meetings earlier this morning was about the communications campaign that we'll need to see underway. Many of you know, of course, you can't get the flu vaccine typically until later this month. So we will have, not this coming week, but I think the week after that, a real push in terms of the vaccination. But for the first time this year, it is required unless it's contraindicated medically for our student body. So that's the one important, I would say, policy change that we've made. My UHS colleagues would probably wonder, I think it'll be really fascinating how the flu season impacts Notre Dame this year. And let me say why. I think some of the protective measures that we've put in place for COVID, I hope will have a really positive impact as well on the transmission of the flu. As well. So I think it'll be really fascinating. One of the things I read over the summer is a decade-old research study at the University of Michigan, where they actually were thinking about effective measures, and one residence hall actually adopted both mask wearing and hand washing. The second residence hall adapted, I think, only one, maybe it was mask wearing, and the third was sort of regular practices. And they saw a significant reduction in transmission of the flu in the hall that had both of the practices that we've been talking so much about as a campus in terms of mask wearing and hand washing. So fingers crossed that that's one place where we might get lucky thanks to both the vaccine and the health and safety practices we have in place.
Thanks, Michael. Oh,
sorry.
you're so good. Go for it, Renee.
So I just have a question about what's going to happen in terms of programming when it starts to get colder outside and when all of us are use those outdoor, so not like the best option when we use those outdoor spaces to the weather.
Yeah.
And if that's going to relate to all at all to the possibility of dorm rooms sort of becoming more flexible.
Good question on the second. Let me answer what I know about the first, and you actually have an expert in the room who may even know more than me in terms of Karen Kennedy, in terms of programming. But I serve on the university's operations committee, and we did, when I showed those slides at the beginning, sort of all of the physical changes on campus. That's the group that put that together. They're also the group that prepared the initial outdoor spaces. So we are reconvening about a month early, we hope. Today was really colder than I thought it was going to be, to start to brainstorm some additional spaces. I hope one of the ideas, although I would say it wasn't all that successful, remember a couple of weeks ago when it was cold, or excuse me, when it was really hot, we opened up a variety of different spaces to students that were air conditioned, really to try to support cooling options, because we had always assumed that students would be in classrooms and we were in the pause. And so we got a little surprised. And so we opened up, for example, I think the 7th and 8th floor of Duncan Student Center, Corbett Hall, and a couple of other places. Even the JACC Purcell Pavilion, where I heard there was all of one student who took advantage of that air-conditioned space. So I would say easy answer is we'd probably go back and look at some of those spaces to see if we could make them available to students. We need your feedback, though, and your ideas about why those didn't work when it was really hot out, right? Because we didn't see a lot of utilization during that week when it was in the 90s. And so I don't know if that same trend would hold for the cold, but what I can say with full confidence is the university is going to try as hard as we can to make as many spaces available to students to come together and connect. Will it impact the residence hall guest policy? I don't know. We've changed it twice already. So I could come back to you next week with another answer there. And what we're trying to do is be really responsive to the trends we're seeing. Happily, we have seen, by and large, no evidence of classroom transition or program transmission. It's really around social interaction. So I think that's where it gets challenging with the residence halls. But we're open to conversation. If there are ideas that students have, please bring them to me or to rectors or to colleagues more broadly in residential life, and we'll put them on the table and kick them around with our medical experts. Please know that.
Thanks so much, Renee. All right, we've got 5 more minutes with Aaron, so I'll take, oh gosh, we've got 1, 2, 3 here. So Madison, Laney, and We have a fourth Zoom question as well. Okay, yes, go for it. And I cannot tell who you are.
No, I'm Niels.
Niels, I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay,
Yeah, so,
go for it, Niels.
Aaron, I know you're no rookie to game day, and we all know what the stadium parking lot usually looks like. But in my mind, I think that's the exact kind of setting, where like historically, the regulations that we've been trying to establish would kind of go to the wayside, and where students would, be most reckless is, on a day when we're playing Duke or something like that. So I guess my question for you is, what's best case scenario / what do you hope for the student body on Saturday? And I guess also what precautions do you have in place to kind of curtail misconduct?
Yeah. Best case scenario for me is hang out with one another in the safe ways we've talked about, right? So utilize the library lawn. South Quad is opening up on purpose for students to go and to gather together in those ways. Tailgating is off limits. Let me just say that very clearly. I hope we've said that clearly. There will not be tailgating on campus. And so from an intervention or an enforcement standpoint, I think students should expect a very strict line in terms of the parking lot activity. So that's not going to be an option for students this Saturday. My best hope is that we come together and cheer on the team together and wearing our masks, right? And sitting together and connect with one another after the game. Off campus or bars are a real challenge in terms of transmission. And so I would hope that students would make great choices around gathering together in those small groups and continuing the mask wearing. If we do that, we know we're successful, right? We had opening year masses, right? When we were together in the stadium, we've had a variety of different programming events. The stadium itself, the venue itself is not the risk, right? And we know what prevents transmission is wearing masks. And staying as distant as we can from one another and being outdoors in small groups when you can. Just keep those things in mind, and I hope we'll be successful on Saturday.
Thanks, Niels. We'll move on to Lainey.
Yeah, so my question is actually going to kind of piggyback back on the second thing you said. I had a constituent talk to me and was wondering, and you kind of touched on this in the first thing, but about like the conduct process after the fact if people are breaking the rules and like how you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. One is, and you're right, I only touched on this, so I'm really grateful for the question. The first thing is, let's remind one another. Remember when we were talking about Green Dot in terms of violence prevention? The same bystander skills apply to all of us as we're thinking about encouraging one another and reminding one another if you've simply forgotten about one of the practices. That's strategy number one. Strategy number two, and I do hope you're seeing this on campus, is what I would call a formative conversation. Maybe you've forgotten twice, 3 times, 4 times. Maybe you're not sure about the efficacy of the practices or why the university has adopted them. So what you should see, and I hope, in whether it's a residence hall community or a classroom setting, is let's have a conversation about why these practices matter and why they protect not only you, but all of us there. And the third option is after you've, I hope, gone through those first 2 steps, might we have a referral to the university conduct process? And what happens there? So what happens is a couple of different things. Every report is read and considered, and it's really important to us that students, I hope, have an understanding of the process. In most cases, a referral to the university conduct process probably results for an on-campus student in a conversation back with hall staff in that case, and that's the predominant number of cases. The second, let's say it's a little more serious in terms of the potential violation, would result in what's called a conference setting. That's when you have a conversation with 1 or potentially 2 conduct officers at the university to say, what happened? What led you to this set of decisions this day? What might be your reflections on that process? And how do we think about making better choices potentially the next time if it's actually occurred? And then the third setting is the most serious. And that's what Father John shared a little bit about in his letter a week or 2 ago in terms of what we would call a hearing setting. And that's probably the most formal setting that a student would experience. And that's a situation that would occur if the possibility of being separated from the university is on the table. And one of the questions I've heard in recent days from students is, why does that take so long, right? As Father John shared that, it's because we feel it's a really important moment for a student to understand what's occurring and to have the opportunity to understand the setting. So we have a variety of notice and pre-meetings before hearings. So students know, for example, that they can invite witnesses, that they can ask questions about the behavior and the infraction that's allegedly occurred. And so they're well prepared then to come into that setting and have the opportunity to have a support person. And then what happens afterward, right? After a hearing is each case is considered individually. So I've heard a question from students of, hey, I want to know if X results in Y. And sadly, but very deliberately, that's actually not the design of our process. We want to understand what brought a student to a particular decision, what factors might be at play. So let's say somebody was a host of a party versus an attendee of a party. Let's say, actually thinking about Green Dot, that a student actually stepped in to intervene when somebody wasn't wearing a mask and things got out of control, right? And it wasn't the intention of the students. I wanted you to know that the teams that are thinking in those settings are considering all of those individual factors. And it's why it's not as simple as a grid or a matrix for a set of students. But I do hope it's a process that students can feel comfortable asking questions about so that they can feel that they have an opportunity to understand the process there. And the last thing I guess I'll say that I think is important to mention is Father John purposely in the university has had this practice. It long predates me. We don't comment on the outcomes of cases. He shared that number of students involved in hearings, but because we had been hearing a lot of concern on campus that we weren't taking things seriously, and that's why we shared it. But we have no desire as an institution to make an example of students. You're our students. We want you here and we care about you. And these are some of the most difficult conversations and challenges that we have. So we're not going to share outcomes of those particular hearing processes because we care about the privacy of the students involved.
Thank you so much for that question, Lainey.
Sorry to spend so much time. I know I'm over time, but I think that was an important one for all of you to be aware of.
I know we've hit 45, but I want to honor Madison's question, then Alex's question as well. So go for it, Madison.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know if the university had any kind of ideas about what they're gonna do with the dining spaces that are outside when it gets cooler, if we're just going to only be able to eat in our church.
Yeah, so I think still TBD. What we've learned, particular in the cases that we saw over that first month, is that actually dining was one of our most significant risks of transmission. And I mean that in the most casual way. It's why Duncan Student Center, for example, is still carry out only. I know that is an annoyance and a frustration. It's based on what we heard from students in contact tracing there. So we need to have some solution, I think. But Mickey Kidder, who is a colleague of mine who actually works with the campus dining team, is still working out the alternative there. We want to balance that interest again of convenience for students and safety. So it's on what I would call the cold weather long list. If you want to ask me what I'm worried about, I'm really worried about January and February too. It's not only cold, but it's dark here. And that's something I haven't mentioned, but I'm worried about isolation and the well-being of all of you in a very deep way as well. And I think as we get to that cold weather, whether it's dining or something else, I think we really have to take care of one another and be checking in on one another.
Thank you, Erin. And our final question will be from Alec, and I can read that to you. Kind of a two-parter, but he asks, is there a timeline in place for further lifting of restrictions, such as being able to visit other dorms? Or are we unlikely to relax restrictions for a while? And then the second one is, will we get tested before we go home after the semester?
Okay, so there is no timeline for change. I meet every morning as part of Father John's reopening committee to talk about the trends and the numbers that we're seeing and any things that should be on consideration. So there isn't a firm sort of like in 2 weeks, we'll revisit and look at the hall guest policy or how we think about programs and dining spaces. We're doing that in a very dynamic way and trying to respond and really gathering together on a daily basis. So yes, things have changed really quite substantially, I would say, even since we've returned. Thanks again to student feedback or what we've observed. And I would anticipate the same to come, especially as we go toward that weather transition. The second one, in terms of departing from Notre Dame, we've done a little bit of thinking about this, but this is actually a really important conversation for the university to have and a great partnership we've had over the last few months with our Deputy County Health Officer, Dr. Mark Fox, who is going to provide input and expertise into us on a departure plan. What I can say without exception and because this came up with some requests of students early in the year, is that if a student is returning home and in the same immediate household with a high-risk family member and really worried about that, that's something actually the Sarah Bay Accessibility Services Office can be of support and help for those students. Our hope and our aspiration is you're all going to be able to go home safely. And we know that some of you will go home to states that might have differing requirements as well. But in terms of whether there'll be mandatory testing, that's an ongoing and current conversation with Dr. Fox to see how he would advise. And then in addition, I am positive, we talked with another peer institution today, consult colleagues across the country on that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Erin, and engaging in dialogue. I think this was a really fruitful discussion. I'm sorry we have to cut it short now, but I think we got 10 really quality questions in there. And if you have further, I'm sure Erin would be happy to answer those over email or another forum. But thank you guys all so much.
Sounds great. Thank you for the invitation. And the last thing I'll say is actually, you can email me. Emailing me is a little bit of a black hole, so I please apologize about that. But Sarah, Erin, Rachel, and Sam are all in that reopening committee I mentioned. And actually, we fire through questions, so that's a great resource as well. We go through a shared Google Doc, and I'm shared by a couple of academic partners. So use me as a resource. Ginger is my assistant, and these guys know how to find her too, and she'll make sure that I get back to you as well. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Erin. Perfect. We'll sanitize it, of course. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much for that really fruitful discussion. I think we can move to some executive announcements, which we'll go quicker through because I know we have a limited time frame, but just wanted to remind you all that this is Stand Against Hate Week, and we have the final event coming up tomorrow, which is a Koru mindfulness and meditation session. If that sounds up your alley, you can look at that link in the agenda for the details on that. I also was scheduled to give a Community Campus Advisory Coalition update, which is a mouthful. Rachel and I serve on that with some Common Council members from the city of South Bend. But really, Erin covered a lot of what we discussed in that, so I don't think we need to dive too deep in there. But I can hand it over to Rachel to talk more about the Student Advisory Council, which just occurred this past week.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Good to see all your faces. I'm just gonna wait.
Hello. Okay. Just quickly, one thing that we've been working on. So I was assigned to a task force by Father Jenkins on off-campus students, just because we're starting to see a little bit of a divide, especially exacerbated during this time, in the ways that we are distinguishing behavior, and especially with the lockdown that just happened, knowing that that created a little bit of a separation. So the aim of this task force was to work to make sure that we have good relations with our off-campus students. I'm really excited that our off-campus council is now established. We got those elections done, so excited to now be working with Connor and Blake. But we put together this advisory committee of off-campus students who can just sort of speak to the everyday experience of what it's like to be an off-campus student, especially during this COVID time. So it's a little bit different than off-campus council because it's specifically COVID oriented. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there on Wednesday. If you have more questions, I think Connor or Blake could speak to that. But we're just excited to be able to have these dialogues and give these off-campus students more of a voice, a formalized body to express their concerns. And so we're looking forward to the future of that. And if you have any concerns, feel free to talk to any of us about that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rachel. And also, I think, Thomas Davis, do you want to come down here? Cool. You can take my chair.
All right, and then I will hit our last two executive announcements. The first is a campus dining thank you card drive. So Department of Student Life is putting that on tomorrow outside both North and South dining halls from 1 to 3. Just an opportunity for us to thank all of our wonderful dining hall workers and staff members here for all of their great work. And a special shout out to Ian and Izzy, our co-directors of Student Life, for working on that. And then tomorrow is September 11th, and student government will be having our annual 9/11 prayer service at the Grotto at 8:46 p.m. It is our annual tradition to do that. Sabrina, our director of Faith and Service, has been working really hard on making that happen this year. We are taking all the health and safety precautions very seriously. So there is a limited capacity at the grotto. And so we also will be live streaming that event, and you got that email earlier today with all the details on that. So I think that wraps up executive announcements.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. That's perfect. And now, before we get into our first order of business, I think just in the spirit of wanting to have a robust session with Aaron, we extended that a little bit. And we only have this space for a limited period of time too, as you know. I'll get to you in 1 second, Michael Murakami. I think we've got 3 really important, timely orders of business on the agenda. So today I would smile upon a motion to have us adjourn at 7:45. If anyone wants to make that motion, that would be appreciated. Michael, yeah, what's up? Okay, anyone want to second that? We have any debate on that? Cool, let's vote on that. All in favor? Phenomenal. All opposed? Okay, cool. We'll adjourn at 7:45. That's really exciting. Thank you all. I can now hand it over to Thomas Davis for this appointments to the Committee on the Constitution, or as he calls it, ComCon. Oh yeah, no, you're good. It's clean.
That works. Hello, everyone. Today is a very exciting moment for me. This is a special part of the Committee on the Constitution being able to nominate or appoint at-large members of the student body. As you all know, per the senatorial statement that you all passed earlier on, it's a very important year to go through the Constitution as well as our bylaws of our student union branches. We had nearly 80 applicants for this committee, which is like exponentially above any years in the past. So that was very exciting to hear. And it was a very thorough process, and I'm very happy with the appointments I've been able to make. You should have all had the link to the appointment letter and approval for you to take a look at. So at this time, I'd love to submit those 14 names of appointments to the Senate Committee on the Constitution for your approval.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Thomas, are you putting forward a motion to do that in mass or in block?
First, I'd ask that they could all stand just so that everyone can see them. And then I also would like to, yeah, fantastic. There are a few, once we get into questioning, that weren't able to come due to academic, either classes or being teaching assistants, which is exciting. But yes, if we could have this motion in block, that'd be fantastic.
Welcome all. I thought that I saw faces that I didn't know, so this is exciting. Welcome. Okay. Yes, what's up, Lainey?
Do we have the motion for that, or?
Yes, Thomas also smiles upon it.
Okay, motion to vote in block.
All right. Are there any points of debate on that? Okay, fabulous. And we can vote on that. Would we like to hear these in? We still do. Oh, no, you're totally fine. Okay, awesome. We can vote now on if we'd like to hear these folks in block. All in favor? Okay, and all opposed? Awesome, good stuff. Okay, Thomas, they do have to exit the room at this point, correct? Or no?
Technically, there's question.
Oh, okay, cool. Then we can do questioning of them, and then they must exit the room after that. Cool, questioning, folks. Anyone got one? Yeah, Michael Murakami.
Senator Dugan, what's changed in the last 3 weeks that makes you believe you earned this spot?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay, so, one of the things I think I may have in the prior meeting not really explicated on my real passion for the student union constitution writ large, and in addition to that, some very specific changes. I think I went through with, or I asked Thomas, for example, for a copy of the Constitution. I went through and marked up a bunch of things that I'd like to see changed, that I think are ambiguous, that I think could use a lot more of a clarifying phrasing. I am really dedicated to that work. It's something I really enjoy doing on the CCC and part. We just recently completed a whole which are similar to those of actually some other applicants that Thomas has put forward. If you read the letter, are things that I would like to say, I think they can qualify. I think they very well, with a little higher than
Awesome. Thanks for that exchange, guys. Any further questions for the candidates themselves? Yeah, Isabella.
Motion to end questioning and move to debate.
Okay, cool. We can vote on that. All in favor? All opposed? Great. And so Thomas, this is now the point where we send them into the world? Cool. Oh, you're just saying now. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, like that. Cool. Yeah. You just say, yeah, I'll swap. Nobody swaps. Okay, everyone, I think they have all cleared out. We are now in debate. Does anybody have a point of debate they would like to raise? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, all in favor, hands. All opposed? Great, okay, we can now move to a vote. Would we like to approve these nominations that Thomas Davis has put forward in block? All in favor? Fabulous, all opposed? That was super easy. Congratulations to Thomas Davis, who has spent hours in interviews to create this great team. So exciting. Thank you guys all for approving. Thank you. Appreciate it back there. Oh, that's fine. Okay, good enough. Thomas, whatever you choose for them. Yay. Welcome back, folks. Thomas has news.
Once they're all here. I'm very excited to share with all of you that you're now officially members of the committee and that our first meeting is at 9 p.m. this evening. So be there or be square on Zoom. Thank you.
Sweet, yay. Awesome. That was very smooth. Congratulations, everyone. I'm really excited to working with you all on ComCon. I think it's a great name and great work will come out of it. So we can move on to general orders. So the first item on the agenda is SS 2021-16, which I believe that I can go forward and read unless, I don't know if Kaya, Malin, Abby have arrived yet, but I see Malin. Fabulous. Hello. Okay, for ease sake, I will read it because I've got the mic in my hand, but shout out to Malin. All right, so SS 2021-16 is a resolution to commit to anti-racist action at Notre Dame. Whereas the Student Senate recognizes that layers of institutional, cultural, and interpersonal racism continue to operate within the Notre Dame community. Whereas, according to the results of the most recent Inclusive Campus Student Survey report, released to September 2020, 13% of respondents felt they had personally experienced adverse treatment, including but not limited to verbal or written comments, stereotyping, exclusion, discrimination, threats, damage to property, or physical assault at Notre Dame due to their racial or ethnic identity. Whereas, according to the spirit of inclusion at Notre Dame, the university aims to consciously create an environment of mutual respect, hospitality, and warmth in which none are strangers and all may flourish. Whereas, according to the University of Notre Dame's mission statement, the university strives to create a sense of human solidarity and concern for the common good that will bear fruit as learning becomes service to justice in the light of Catholic social tradition. Whereas the Senate recognizes the importance of student organizing and activism to bring attention to ways in which the Notre Dame community can grow in service to justice. Whereas history shapes the present and Notre Dame's commitment to anti-racist action, both on administrative and student levels, will be shaped by how it acknowledges minority student experiences and voices in light of a long history of students of color feeling marginalized at this university. Whereas minority student voices are often left out of national and educational conversations, despite their critical function in enriching dialogue on all levels. Therefore, be it resolved by the Student Senate of the University of Notre Dame du Lac that the university should continue to engage in constructive dialogue with leaders of the Black Student Association, Notre Dame Socially Responsible Investing, and the organizers of the Notre Dame Strike for Black Lives pertaining to their organization's goals and steps forward to foster an anti-racist campus community. All right, that is Resolution SS 2021-16. I would invite any questions, and they can be directed at any of the co-sponsors. I believe the ones who are present, myself, Aaron, Malin, and David Hongs in place of Matthew Bisner. So yes, any questions? Yeah, Mike.
So I guess I can direct this to any of you.
Sure.
The resolution is titled, "The Resolution to Commit to Anti-Racist Action in Notre Dame." It doesn't look like student government is making any sort of firm commitment here. It seems like we're asking Notre Dame to keep doing what it's doing. So what action are we committing to in this resolution?
Yeah, I think the action that we're committing to is, first of all, a continuance of the dialogue that Erin had stated in her presentation earlier with the Black Student Association's task force, which has worked into 4 working groups on campus policing, student life, mental health, as well as academic and curriculum changes. I think we're asking for not only the Black Student Association to continue that conversation, but for SRI, who's become a very prominent student organization, as well as the independent organizers of Notre Dame Strike for Black Lives to continue that dialogue in that forum with the Division of Student Affairs. And from there, I believe that action cannot be committed unless there's dialogue prior to that and establishing what steps need to be taken pertaining to those goals. And so we're asking for that conversation, just as the mission statement says, so that to bear fruit to justice and action further down the line. But I think we need to get those people in the doors and that conversation to be had first. Yeah, follow up.
I guess just why not have the Senate commit affirmatively today to particular steps and things that we want to have accomplished? Why simply have the dialogue come in that form rather than have the organization, which is constitutionally competent, form the voice of the undergraduate student body, put out a joint statement? I feel like that, why is that not something that is being done here?
Sure, yeah, I think this is actually a preliminary resolution. I don't know if you saw in my agenda for last week, but I had an invitation to all senators that if you'd like to join the Senate Working Group on Racial Justice, to email me. We met on Saturday. It was a really great diverse group of not only Senate representation, but also student organizers. And we decided that, you know what, in this short time frame that we had, the first thing that we could put forward was a spiritual commitment to this movement. We didn't want to put forth any concrete steps unless we had the chance to talk with those institutions first. I know Karen and Thomas in our preliminary conversation at the beginning of this year said you must talk to a university body before you put forward a resolution stating it. And so we wanted to make sure we had those dialogues within the Division of Student Affairs and called forward BSA, called forward SRIs to incorporate their voices into the Senate dialogue. And so we're going to continue to put forward resolutions along this vein for the remainder of the semester. But this is just a preliminary first spiritual step in that direction, laying the framework. Yeah, follow up.
So I guess along those lines, have you talked to MSTS, Division of Student Affairs representatives, also institutional equity representatives prior to creating this bill? Is that something that's been shaping? The language here is primarily been the communication with student organizers.
No, it's been with student organizers to get their voice, but also we've had meetings with Erin Hoffman Harding from the Division of Student Affairs. We've had conversations with Erin Oliver from the Office of Institutional Equity, and we've had conversations with Consuela Howell from the Office of Student Enrichment. Yeah.
So was MSPS on that list, or is that?
Oh yes, also Paige Jackson from MSPS. We just had diversity training with her with our cabinet 2 weeks ago as well. All right, do we have any further questions, folks? Yeah.
And were all of those meetings that you just listed with respect to the topics of this resolution? I know you mentioned, I think, the MSPS had diversity training 2 weeks ago. The strike for Black Lives obviously occurred last week. So have you talked with them specifically about what you're doing here?
Yeah, we have an ongoing discussion with Paige Jackson, and it's not just limited to one thing or another. So we did talk to them about the strike as well and conversations that we want to have going forward. Yeah, Niels, what's up?
I guess my question is just like based out of ignorance, and how did the strike go, and what would you guys prefer to see? Or like what, I guess, is like a good next step along those same lines or in those same veins?
Definitely. I think maybe I can hand that one either to Malin or Aaron. I know I've been taking a lot of these questions, but I think that Malin was a tremendous advocate. And as our Director of Student Empowerment, I think she's a great voice on this issue as well.
Yeah, sure. So part of the goal of the Strike for Black Lives that took place last week was to get relief to divest from private prisons and ICE facilities in the United States. So part of the retirement plan that Notre Dame faculty are not necessarily required, but the plan that they're currently a part of invests in these private prisons and ICE detainment facilities, and that's not something that we think is good or that is good for people of color, especially because they're the ones who are most affected by those systems. And so one of the next steps we're hoping to do is to be in dialogue with the administration to get that retirement plan changed. And so I think this resolution is, like Sarah was saying, kind of like a first step in starting that dialogue and creating the rhetoric of anti-racist action that we really want to inform our next more actionable plan, if that makes sense.
Thanks so much, Malin. Do you have follow-up, Niels?
Yeah, kind of. So do you have a strategy for reinvesting those funds, or is it just like, first and foremost, we have to get that money out of these, specifically racist or, unjust positions?
Yeah, I think it's probably for us. I'm not a part of NDSRI, and I wasn't necessarily one of the organizers of the strike. But I think first and foremost, like you said, is the ladder to divest those funds, and then from there decide on a more socially responsible way of investing them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I could just add on, I think the goal here is to provide options and to provide a clear communication of those options as well. Awesome. Further questions, folks? Those were helpful. Yeah, Sam.
Where did you get that wonderful mask, Sarah?
Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate you noticing. I actually have 5 of them and I got them from Vera Bradley. So thank you. Yeah. Okay. Do I hear a motion to end questioning and move to debate? Isabella?
And questioning and move to debate.
Read my mind. Okay, we can vote on that. All in favor? Great. All opposed? Wonderful. We're now in debate. Would anyone like to raise a point of debate? Mike?
Yes, so I'm not sure if I should come forward, so people resume hearing.
Yeah, sure, if you feel so. I think that one has been sanitized most recently.
Yeah, so one thing I would like to say with regards to this resolution in particular, I agree fully with the message here, right? We need to do something to remove the structures that are posing barriers to students of color and prohibiting them from getting the experience that they deserve here. I don't think this resolution does that. What it is titled is a commitment to action. We are not voting substantively on any single idea. We're not calling for Notre Dame to do more than to continue doing what it's doing. And with due respect, if we're calling on Notre Dame to commit with what it's already committed to, we're not really pushing the conversation forward. I really do appreciate the attempts here. I had seen previous versions of similar resolutions. I think those would have been much better. But what I am seeing here today is not something where the Senate is taking this issue head on, and we deserve to. And we owe it to these students to take this issue head on and to come up with statements saying what the student voice is. We're punting. We're saying, Notre Dame, talk with people, but we ourselves are not taking a stand. And I can't support us not taking a stand, given the weight of these issues and the gravities of these issues. I really do hope that the sponsors of this can come back with something better, but I really can't see today myself voting for it because we are not actually taking a stand. I do not think we should punt. We need to have something better. And I would love to work with the sponsors on making something better, making something that is much more aggressive on this, but we don't have that today. And I really urge all of you to table this so that we can work on it more, make it better, and actually take a stand. And for that reason, I move to table the resolution indefinitely.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, sanitization would be good. Sure, Patrick.
I think that I actually pretty strongly disagree with what you just said, Mike. I think that as the student senate, it's not our job to take on every single issue, and that by in the resolve clause, they're going to, the Black Student Association and the people who are most affected and most knowledgeable on this issue is absolutely the right thing to do, because at the end of the day, they're the experts, they're most committed to this issue, and what we're supposed to do is look in the best interest of our dorms and what is best for our campus community. And the people who wrote this bill are extremely competent at what they do, but they are acknowledging that they might not be the greatest to solve all these issues on campus, and that the people in the Black Student Association are. So I would say that it's actually a really good move of us to be in dialogue with them and go to them on that. Thanks for writing this.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll go to Henry Jackson.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree as well. I think that you're stipulating that because this is a statement of support and it's reaffirming a university position that it doesn't matter. Statements matter. What we've seen in the US is that there is a huge amount of disparity between what is said and what is actually practiced when it comes to race relations and with the treatment of different minority groups. So I think it is important to pick up that. I think it also challenges the Senate to work on this issue. I think it serves as a starting off point, and I think it's important that we support it.
Great, thanks, Henry. Ben Earhart.
I'd like to point out something kind of in the middle of those two lines. I think what we've established, what at least student government executive cabinet established recently in the last week with the racial justice working group is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are senators who participate in that. I think going off of what both Patrick and Henry mentioned and what Mike is calling for, I agree with Mike in the sense that I think this is more of a recommitment than a commitment to anything new. That said, I think that what we've established in this racial justice working group is a part of that something new. I think having conversations directly with these student leaders, but then also saying, here are our demands, and so we're all on the same page. Here's what we all want: Senate, executive, and especially these student organizations who have been at the front of this well before we have problems. So I'd like to argue that this resolution is more of a recommitment than anything, but I also don't want to dismiss the fact that there already are some pretty concrete steps being taken, which is why, again, I see this as more of a recommitment than so much as a commitment to something new. There's something new being further actions that will come from discussions in these working groups.
Thanks for that perspective, Ben. Madison.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of echo what Patrick was saying. No offense, but this is not the most diverse body of students. And I think it's really important for the students who are most affected by these issues and the changes to come to be at the fore. So I don't really think that we should be stipulating what changes need to be made. I think if anything, we should see the changes that those students are calling for, those student groups are calling for, and support those. So I don't think that we necessarily need to say you need to do this, 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 and this. So I think it's a good step to first support the continuance of their conversations with the university. And as they can work with the university and create more concrete solutions, I think we should support those when they come out.
Great, thank you, Madison. Lainey.
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what she said. I don't think we necessarily know what we need to do and to take those steps, but I feel like this resolution will help aid us in dialogue with the individuals that do know the steps that should be taken, and I think that we need to support it in order to get those steps to be taken so we can communicate with the individuals that are going to be with us in that scenario.
Thank you, Lainey. Behind Lainey, I'm sorry, the light. Oh, Natalie, go for it.
I don't think institutional racism is something you can like turn over overnight. You have to, it's something that's like gradual. And I think by passing this, it is just the first step of many. And I don't think that like, at least this Senate this year will be able to do anything like super substantial, like change the level of diversity in their name. That's something that again is gradual. So like to say that we shouldn't pass this because it's not like a direct commitment. And like you also said, Sarah, it's something that like you can't promise anything right now because it's so hard to have these conversations. Like you need to have the dialogue first before you like force people to do anything. And I'm not saying that like diversity is something you need to force, but like you know what I mean. It's just like not something that you can't. I mean, sorry, words.
you need to like, just start something first before you like jump into it full force.
Thank you, Natalie. Isabella?
Yeah, just kind of to echo those points, and I think, I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to say it as eloquently as Madison and Natalie just did, but just kind of to jump off of that, being able to commit, and if we're using then sort of conclusion, recommit ourselves to creating an anti-racist campus community, which I think we all in this chamber can agree is the ultimate goal, no matter how, incredibly like pie in the sky it seems at the moment. In order to begin to make concrete changes, I believe that today's legislation can truly, A, bring us a step in the right direction, but also B, demonstrate the fact that as a body, we're aware of the fact that given the sheer the lack of diversity in our body, that we may not be the best equipped to move forward and to create legislation for issues that may not directly affect us and directly affect the groups that we see, sort of relied on in this specific bill. So I just think that fundamentally, in order to begin to make those changes, today's resolution is going to be absolutely fundamental.
Thank you, Isabella. Mike?
Yeah, again, I do think it's moving things forward. I don't think it moves things forward enough. And I think that's sort of the disagreement that's going on. I think there are concrete things that we could add that I think the sponsors would probably support, maybe the amendment. The thing is, I can't amend to append a giant amount of resolves into this thing, keeping it the same. And I recognize that. But one thing I do think that we all know is, what is SRI's goal? Well, SRI's goal is to defund, or not to defund, but to divest from private prisons. There are very specific, tangible goals that we could insert into something like this. And I'm not 100% sure that I would want to go forward and say, continue to meet these people without giving an explicit endorsement in there that the Senate backs them. I think if we could insert language to that, it would be much stronger. And I think it would get our goal done a lot better than simply saying, hey, please talk to these people. That's how it reads to me. And I think that we can reword it a lot more better. That's my objection.
Thank you, Mike. We have Blake.
I disagree here because I don't think passing this resolution necessarily warrants any further action by Senate. I think Senate's role here as a body is to help support groups like SRI and PSA, and other groups that are walking people whose sole task is to pass issues like this, that have conversations like this. I think one does that. Be in a supporting role here and to help this constructive dialogue. I don't think passing this resolution means that we can't do anything. I think that the whole year in that now, and as time progresses, as we learn more about issues like this, I think there's more time to take action.
Thanks so much, Blake. Yeah, we have Natalie, and then I'll move to Aaron, of course.
I also want to say that it's very important that we keep the voices of the people who are directly affected by this in the forefront of this fight. And so, like, not to be offensive, like, I'm going to word this as well as I can, but I don't necessarily feel like a white man should be the first to say anything about how we should move forward, especially this is just like one small step in like a long, long way that we have to take. And like, I don't mean that in any offensive way. I just really do feel like this is something that was made up by a very diverse group of people who know what they're talking about, who are directly affected by this. Therefore, we shouldn't like diminish their voices to, oh, we're not passing anything solid, so we shouldn't move forward with this because it's not a direct commitment to anything. And like, also a direct commitment to anything doesn't mean that we're gonna, that it's necessarily going to happen. It's like, it's better that we do it with this than promise something and not follow through, because then we would really like feel backlash. So.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And thank you for like all of your points. But I just want to say from my own perspective, I think what we've seen, like, of course, this has been a continuing conversation from the summer and now into the fall. And so one, again, a recommitment to amplifying the voices. That's what Rachel and Sarah ran on. And it's really about being a liaison for the student body and the administration. And so what I envision this resolution as a necessary step in one, really connecting the people with the administration who are leading the charge. the Division of Student Affairs has been meeting with the Black student leaders who wrote the petition and the original statement that Aaron referenced earlier today. But also this pushes the administration to meet with NDSRI and the students who led the Notre Dame strike for Black Lives. And so that's why I think this is a really important step. And again, this isn't the last step. This is at the beginning, and we got to keep going. So at least that's what I want to share to like help give perspective. I don't think the university has yet met with those other representatives from those other groups. So I think this is really important to get through.
Thanks, Aaron. Mike?
Yeah, so I guess I would make a statement, my initial statement, Notre Dame has not met with the Strike for Black Lives or with SRI. The way it's written, it appeared that they're continuing to meet with these people. But if there hasn't been that, my objection is off the table. It is a step forward.
Okay,
So
thank
is there any
you.
clarity on that? I'd love to hear it if people have knowledge of that situation. Because that's new information. It's not the rest of it.
Personally, I'm not aware.
I have knowledge that the NDSRI may be meeting with finance tomorrow, but that's not a larger university body. So having more diverse conversations as well with other actors. Yeah, Sam Canova.
Given the heard from all perspectives, so motion to go to the vote. Second.
All right, all in favor? Fabulous, all opposed? Okay, great. We are now in a vote over SS 2021-16. All in favor, you can raise your hand. Great, and all opposed? Wonderful, thanks so much. SS 2021-16 passes. We can now move on to SO 2021-07, which I believe Aaron is going to read for Grace.
Well, no, she's on the call, but she is comfortable.
Oh,
But completely your call.
well, I have noticed, I have received a few emails from senators during this time that they have to leave for other commitments at 7:30. So if Grace, the sponsor, is comfortable moving it, so am I. Can I just get confirmation from that from Grace?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, there she is.
That's horrible if you can hear me coming through the loudspeakers. So sorry. Yeah, we will probably not review applications until a week and a half from now. So in the interest of protecting everyone's time, I'm totally happy to move this to next week.
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm so glad that it's a week and a half and not a week. That's perfect. Okay, great. We can move SO 2021-07 to new business for next time. We actually have two things already coming up there. From Matthew Bisner / David Hongs, we've got SO 2021-08, which is an order to suspend latecomer FCC elections. Thank you for your work in that regard. And we also have SO 2021-09, which is an order proposing an amendment to the constitution of the undergraduate student body, replacing the executive programming board with the executive committee. So exciting things coming down the pipeline. Mike. That is correct. Yes, motion to table Grace's resolution for next meeting. Beautiful, let's vote on that. Hands, amazing. Okay, now it is tabled for next meeting. Great to follow that, Parley Pro. All good. Okay, announcements, the exciting part. Anyone have anything going on in their lives that they'd like to share with everyone? Isabella.
There's an improv show tonight. It's
Ooh.
at Washington Hall at 10 p.m. If you're into that and want to laugh, we don't promise it, but we can.
Isabella, is that the High School Musical thing I've seen?
Oh, yes, I looked at pictures of Zac Efron from 2006 for 3 hours, put together the worst poster you've ever seen. So if you feel like supporting that, I also would appreciate it.
That is exciting. Sweet, thanks. Anyone else? Yeah, Madison.
So my grandfather is kind of fighting for his life right now, so if you pray, I just wanted to ask you to pray for him, and if you don't pray, just send good vibes, so I would appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Madison. We'll definitely keep him in my prayers. Any further announcements from folks?
Second.
Okay, we can vote on that. Great. I hope you guys have a wonderful, safe weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Spend time with your loved ones. Good to see you all in person. Hope we can keep doing this.